to That Lit Astro Chick. I'm your host, your fellow writer, as well as budding astrology chart reader. I was trying to figure out who I could talk about next because I just talked about Oscar Hill since he was currently a trending topic, but I do want to dedicate this channel to discussing the astrology charts of authors and writers because it's a topic that comes up among my other peers that are writers where we will sometimes wonder, was it in the stars for us to write? And usually I can point to some place where it is. And I wanted to talk about one of my favorite authors because there's a movie currently going on, or that's currently out, called American Fiction, that's based on his novel. I hadn't heard about the novel initially until my mom had sent me a link to it. And initially, when I've spoken with people about the movie, they've said, "Oh, it's gonna be lit. It got Issa Rae in it." And then they read about the plot, and then they're like, "Oh my God, I can't watch this," because I think that they're assuming that it's going to be a lot more serious than what it actually is. So I haven't seen the movie. I'll most likely see the movie when it comes out for streaming or something like that. But the movie American Fiction, it's based on the novel Erasure, which is one of my favorite novels. I would say it's top 3. And it's about a black male author who is trying to break into the literary industry, and he has all of these other topics that he wants to write about. If I remember this correctly, because I haven't read the novel in so long, he wants to talk about mythology, and nobody wants to pick up that novel. And then he finds out about this other author who has written this book that is just a stereotype of a minstrel show, of all of the things that are considered to be negative and detrimental about Black people. And she passes this off as though it's her original work or it's based on her life, but it turns out it wasn't based on her life at all. So then the author goes through the protagonist. He writes a novel very similar to that, and then he hits this literary success. And it's a really interesting novel, especially because I'm a writer of color, I'm a Black woman, and I have been in the literary community now for more than 20 years, and there is still this stigma and this stereotype about what it is that you can talk about pertaining to your race, and it ends up being these endless streams of struggle stories. And then sometimes I wonder, who do these stories represent? Who do they benefit? And I think sometimes it's because it's sort of to show as like an ongoing minstrel show, that if you want to talk about something else aside from pain that's associated with racism or misogyny or misogynoir, unless you're able to do it as a way that will pander to other people, which will also kind of remind them of, oh, well, at least my life isn't that bad. Nobody wants to read what you have to say, but I digress. So I thought that it would be really good to look at Percival Everett's astrology chart as being a second video, especially because American Fiction is still going on at the theater. So a little bit about him. Percival Everett is a distinguished professor of English at the University of Southern California. He's best known for Erasure, I Am Not Sidney Poitier, and Trees, which was shortlisted for the 2002 Booker Prize. He has written, I want to say it's more than 30 works that he's amassed throughout the years. He has an incredible catalog in terms of books that he's written, short stories, essays. He's a very versatile author. So let's get into his chart. I don't have a birth time, so I can't do anything in terms of the houses, but I did just use a placeholder. He was born in December 22nd, 1956 in Fort Gordon, Georgia. Like I said before, I don't know the birth time. Now, what stands out at first to me is that he's born on the 22nd. That's referred to a number where you will either be controlled or control when it comes to different situations that you might be put into in terms of an outcome. He may have been constantly put into those situations where he was either forced to evaluate what others wanted versus what he wanted. And he may have learned over time that he has to put his needs first based on his experiences. He's a life path 1, which is ruled by the sun. And this is a life path that deals a lot with leadership, with manhood, with masculinity. The sun, which is represented by Leo in the zodiac, it's one of the most masculine signs of the zodiac. And this could have something to do with the hallmarks of his books because he talks a lot about challenges, aspirations, imagery when it comes to being a black man and black masculinity. And this is what makes Erasure so people that I've spoken about. I don't know if they've been able to see how humorous this could actually be because they might be looking at it through the lens of it might be a tragedy, even though we have Issa Rae and she's a comedian. But back to the natal chart. He challenges the notion that black authors can only write fiction that's from a struggling standpoint, and because that's usually the only vantage point that's available for black authors to access. He's a Capricorn sun. I think I know the degree, but I'm not sure. I want to say it's at the 0 degree, which is a really important degree in terms of it could either go really well, so this person could either be very successful or they're just going to be a complete flop. Everett obviously is incredibly successful. So as a Capricorn sun, he is, his sun sign is ruled by Saturn, which would make him someone who's very hardworking. He's ambitious, he's serious, and he's very diligent when it comes to his goals. I think that this is one of the aspects of the chart as to why he's been able to produce so much work during his lifetime. And he's actually very funny, but in a deadpan way. I've had a chance to meet him before, and he has this air of himself that is incredibly serious, but he can say something that's hilarious, and he just will not break out into a smile when he says it. There's a somewhat depressive charm to him, and I think that this is attributed to the fact that he's a Capricorn sun. Even the time when I had a chance to meet him, because I have met him twice. It was during a lecture, and somebody's cell phone went off during his lecture, and he cracked a joke. I can't remember the joke, but it was just the fact that he was able to crack a joke during his reading that was so funny, because most authors would be super pretentious if somebody's cell phone rang during one of their readings. In addition to that, he's also a Virgo moon, which means that his mother was most likely very youthful and beautiful, especially at the time when she had him. And she also provided him with a lot of structure when growing up. And I would say that this is magnified because his Jupiter in Libra is on his natal, and I'll get to that later on. But this means that he most likely had a childhood that was very fulfilling in terms of helping him to what his destiny was going to be. His moon is also conjunct to his Pluto, which is in Virgo, which would make him a very powerful person in this lifetime. And this is going to be very helpful for his nodes because he is a Scorpio North node. In addition to that, his moon trines with his sun, and this is one of the most harmonious aspects that you could have in a chart. I think that one of the best aspects that you could have is when your sun and your moon are working harmoniously together, because it just makes everything else so much easier. He also has his Mercury in Capricorn. They're not conjunct because they're in separate degrees. However, with his Mercury in Capricorn, this would make him someone who's very efficient at giving lectures, who can provide very precise answers. When I had the chance to interview him many, many moons ago, he was very good at providing me with answers that were very much straight to the point. I also would say because he has his Mercury in Capricorn, he is most likely very serious with his friends too, but I do think that he has a lot of admiration for his friends, and we're going to get into talking about one of the friends that I know that he had in a minute. And this does also contribute to his work ethic. Now, his Venus is in Sagittarius, and this is aspected at least 8 times in the chart. And his Venus in Sagittarius is at the 3rd degree. That Sagittarius strength is going to be heightened because it's at the 3rd degree, especially because 3 is ruled by Jupiter, so he still has very much of that Jupiter influence. This makes him someone who's very optimistic, even if he may not show it, especially as a Capricorn sun. Like I said, optimistic, generous, loyal, someone who's very fond of beauty and travel and the fine arts as well as horses. And he has lived in and he did live in Wyoming when he was a kid, and he still has a farm in Wyoming, and he also has a lot of horses. True fact. In fact, his short story collection, Half an Inch of Water, is about farm work and horses and lots of animals. So that does very much line up with him having his Venus in Sagittarius. He has his Mars in Aries, which would make him a very gifted athlete. I don't know if he played sports, especially because his Aries Mars is at a quincunx to his Virgo moon. So maybe he did play sports, and maybe he was kind of clumsy at it. In fact, this is going to be a good little sidebar, because he's quite tall. The first time when I met him, he said that a lot of the times people will confuse him for being a basketball player when people ask why is he famous, and they don't think initially of him as a writer. I don't know. It could have been that Aries Mars, but this would make him somebody who might be very good at mitigating conflict, especially because Mars is at its home when it's in Aries. This also could contribute to being very good at physical labor, and I know that you have to have that as as somebody who works on a farm or someone who works on a ranch. Now, as I said before, his Jupiter is in Libra, and that's on the natal, which is the lowest point. This is a really great place because Jupiter is exalted when it's in the fourth house. I don't know if it's in the fourth house officially because I don't have his birth time. I just used a placeholder. But I wanted to bring that up because that means that he had a childhood where he thought deeply and appreciatively about his heritage and the good things that came from it. It also shows that he most likely had a childhood that was very effective and very positive in terms of the way that he saw himself. It also could refer to the harmonious relationships that he has with people. And he may not have felt like he had a really good relationship with people, especially because his Jupiter is squaring his sun. And I think that this could contribute to why he might be a little bit more quiet in person. However, his Jupiter does trine with his Chiron in Aquarius, which could make him someone who is more popular than what he actually thought he was. But anyway, I just want to say that he's a much nicer person than how he can appear. I think that in terms of his reputation, he could be someone who could be taken as being very seriously. But he's actually a very nice guy. Okay, so his Saturn is conjunct to his Venus, and it's also in Sagittarius, which would make him a very serious person. But when he relaxes, he has a really good sense of humor. He'd also be someone who could likely talk very openly about his thoughts and his feelings when he's prompted, and he could develop a deep appreciation for someone older than him, especially when it comes to his friendships. And this part I know is true. So he was friends with a classmate of mine that I had named Norton. I'll have to find Norton's last name. It's somewhere in my email, and I could do a natal chart on him. And Norton lived to be 101. Now, I remember this clearly because I baked Norton cupcakes for his 100th birthday, and they were gluten-free like he requested. And when I met Percival, he said that he wanted to be like Norton when he grew up. His self-esteem, especially back to Percival, when it comes to his Jupiter and Saturn, when it comes to his Saturn and his Venus conjunct in Sagittarius, maybe his self-esteem could be debilitated only because he might feel like he's too serious or maybe not very popular. And like I said, especially because his sun squares his Saturn. His Uranus is in Leo, which could make him very willful, especially because Uranus in Leo is at its detriment. And it could make him someone who's very determined to get what he wants no matter what. Now, this energy could help him in conflict as well as to produce a lot of work. And as I said before, he has a large body of work because it trines with his Mars in Aries. And also he has his Uranus squaring his Neptune. Now, this isn't one of the harshest squares that you could have. I know that in astrology, sometimes people say that all squares are bad. I don't think that all squares are bad. This one is not that bad. But this could make him someone who might be a bit of a crybaby or maybe needy when it comes to when he might be feeling frustrated, especially when it comes to his production or his work. And he could also appear disheveled at times. I remember when I met him, he said that he only writes for 15 minutes a day. And then he's either doing his teaching work or he's with his family. But I could see how this could be very hard to balance, especially in his younger years with that square. Another aspect that's interesting is that his north node is in Scorpio, and the nodes speak to what it is that we should do in this lifetime. When I write natal charts for people, I sometimes will refer to how these planetary aspects work in terms of questions that they could answer. The south node refers to where we have been. The north node refers to where we should go. And with his north node in Scorpio, that means that his south node was in Taurus. So he most likely, in a previous past life, was someone who was once again very hardworking, somebody who obtained a lot of earthly possessions. And what he is supposed to do this time is to live more on the fringes or to explore the depths of power in terms of what he could obtain or how other people might be able to support him or lean on him, or how he could lean on other people. But the North Node in Scorpio means that he is supposed to plunge deep into the depths and regenerate, especially because Scorpio in astrology represents the eighth house of transformation. Despite him having a rather simple life, I believe that he's achieved his North Node because he has a very strong cult following. I know that when when American Fiction came out, the people that I've spoken to have said that they might feel reticent to watch it based on the subject matter. But just about anybody who reads Percival Everett on a regular basis is just like, oh my God, I love him so much. I'm like that because I was waiting on somebody to write about the things that he wrote about. Now, this could come with some challenges for him because his Chiron in Aquarius squares both of his nodes. And Chiron, I would refer to colloquially as being the who hurt you asteroid. It refers to a wound that we have that might feel missing throughout our times where we might try to heal that wound. So if his Chiron is in Aquarius, this could mean that he might have some struggles in terms of friendships, network, privilege, how he might see his physical body because Aquarius deals with nudity, as well as maybe challenges around an alternative relationship or like an alternative configuration of how to conduct himself in his life. And I think that this is something that he's most likely talked about, especially when it comes to the work that he's produced, because so much of it is around challenging privilege, but it comes at it from a very different way. I wouldn't be surprised if he was younger, if he may have been ostracized by others like him, because I know he's spoken with me before about how it's very difficult if your experience is vastly different from the Black experience, because you deal oftentimes with being ostracized not only from people who aren't Black, but from Black people who are in your own group, and how weird it was that when he was younger, he was really into mythology and very much into the sciences, even though some people might have assumed that he would have been a ball player or something. But I do think that maybe he might be surprised when he's well received, because his Chiron trines with his Jupiter in Libra, and his Libra Jupiter does square with his Sun. So he might be more, especially when he was younger, he might be more surprised that he was liked more than he initially thought that he was. Especially with that moon square Venus, he might have felt insecure about his place in the world and also insecure about women. And I think that this could be why it took him so long to marry. And he is married to the novelist Danzy Senna. I could do another natal chart on her as well. His Neptune and North Node are conjunct both in Scorpio, which would make him a very inspirational person who probably does have a lot of dreams and creativities and inspirations, specifically around obtaining power and what power looks like and what it means to explore the underbelly of society. And this is something that could have fueled the subjects of his novels and the canon of his work. He most likely does rely on other people in his life for inspiration, but I think that that might be a very select group. I know that when we had first met, he had talked about the things that he cares about in his life, and he said he only cares about his wife and his children. He didn't even mention his writing. And I was kind of surprised by that. I thought that he would have had of like accolades and rewards and awards and nominations that his work has received, but he said he just cares about his wife and his children. Um, Now, it might have been something that maybe he could have said because he could be a little bit more understated, especially as a Capricorn sun, or he could possibly be maybe a little bit depressing in his humor. I don't know. I'm just alleging here. But either way, I really do recommend his books. I will be seeing American Fiction most likely when it comes out, and I will also add more authors to this channel. Thanks so much for watching.